Thank you to all of our panelists for that presentation of perspectives. I thought it was, quite varied, diverse, interesting. I want to offer one question to the panel, and Don has kind of queued up for us how we think about this event and the perspective of time. There are two quotes from the original event 25 years ago. You've heard one of them at least already this week, and sort of an arc of history of what has happened, from the civil rights movement through the 1990s, captured in quotes. Jane Jacobs, David Lewis, and Peter Batchelor about Rudats, and the final quote from John Gardner, which I always love, early 1990s, and he said, this thing we're calling collaboration is, it's Copernican almost. And he says if it contained a silicon chip, we'd all be excited. And, this morning we'll use electronic voting for even our deliberations, and it's in everything we're doing now. So, we were talking as a facilitation team last night about, what has occurred from the first event, and of all the things that were focused on 25 years ago, where have we seen the most progress? And it was in this area of democratic practice, not only with this Congress, but cities in general, that we've seen so much positive change and movement forward in this area. But there's a lot of tension with it. It's practiced very differently in different places. We have this whole democratic vernacular. And so, yesterday I was working on something as I was listening to the Pittsburgh panel, and then I just felt a chill down my spine because I heard those words, too much democracy. And Tom Murphy was making a very provocative point. And his point, if you remember his statement, he said, that we use collaboration as an excuse not to make the tough decisions. And that gets into the quality of how we are having that conversation at the community level, as well as, where this whole thing is going as we're remaking our cities moving forward. And so my question to the panel, and I'll ask the mayor to give us a thought first, is, how do you, balance that tension in your community as you are, envisioning the future and really fundamentally reshaping, not just what the city's physical environment is like, but the community that supports and creates that. How do you balance the tension between the tough decisions that need to be made and moving that public agenda forward and making sure that the public voice is fully heard in that process?
Well, first of all, I think as a politician, people invest their hopes and dreams in the person that they vote for. From that standpoint, they make a decision that this is the person that best articulates the ideas and concepts that I might want to see happen for my city. But having said that, they also want to have a sense of empowerment through that person that they invested their vote in. And politicians have to not be afraid to listen to people, because oftentimes we all want the same outcome. It's just a matter of how do we get to that outcome. And there are various ways to get to a particular place. Columbus, well, he didn't prove it, but he traveled east in order to, he traveled west in order to find east. And so, you don't have to have a direct way of getting there. And oftentimes politicians, they want to just cut through the chatter and go directly to finding a solution and implementing that solution, when the better course of action may be to listen to people. It may take you a little off course. It may take you into the high weeds at times, but it's always about giving people a sense of empowerment. And I think in a democratic society, that's what we want to focus in on, how you can get a total consensus from everyone before you make a move to that end result.
And Harris, as somebody who's been that convener of the community conversation in Philadelphia, how do you feel about that balance and tension, and how do you interact with your community leaders.
Yeah. Well, I think the mayor got it right. I mean,
Yeah.
we live in a representative democracy, and ultimately decisions are made by those whom we represent. The work that we do is predicated on engaging in informed citizenry. So it really is about bringing folks together, having an educated conversation about what the issues are, making sure that the focus is narrow so that we are not bringing in the kitchen sink in terms of all the issues of the day. And then ultimately creating a process where the results are then given to the representatives to use as they see fit. The citizens then have the job to ensure that the voice remains heard. So whether it's through communication, whether it's through organizing, but it is it's very important to understand it's a reciprocal relationship between an informed citizenry and our representatives in a representative democracy, and that's the context in which we do the work. It's not really about stopping everything at all costs, because otherwise it would be chaos and we'd devolve into kind of leaders taking charge and citizens feeling like they have no voice. So that's the space that we tried to occupy.
And Don, you threw the challenge down to us. 25 years moving forward. You know, how do you think that tension can unfold, and how do we reach the next level, that 2025 quote, if you will?
Yeah, you know, I think that the challenge is in helping our citizens and neighbors understand the complexity of the task. All too often as professionals, we tend to think in very linear ways. You know, we enter and end. As a process guy, what I'm trying to help people understand is if you're going to be a constituent, if you're going to have an ownership, you've got to really be there from the beginning to the end. Now, to be there from the beginning to the end, you've got to be given a seat. You've got to be resourced so you can stay at the table. We've got to put in place the civic infrastructure, and that means putting it into our municipal budgets so that people can believe that there is, importance attached to their engagement. All too often we send mixed messages. We want you to be engaged, but it's start and stop, it's underfunded, and it's not a priority, it's not made convenient or comfortable. So for me, I think to get to the next 25 years, in the same way we put infrastructure in place for our built environment, we've got to put the infrastructure in place for our civic environment.
Mm-hmm. And finally, Charles, we've talked a bit about how things have evolved, and with your experience in the UK, particularly as things have been the attempt to codify some of this. How do you think that is going to unfold over the next 25 years as we look to the future of this topic and where we're going in our cities?
I think there's a danger that people take this sort of approach for granted and retreat back into the old ways of doing things. But I think the relationship between leadership and the community is absolutely crucial, and I agree with the points that have been made, particularly that the Mayor absolutely sort of said it very concisely. Often leaders are frightened of criticism, and I think you have to approach these processes with a very open mind and not be defensive about it, and just learn from what the community is saying. But a lot of our work now is not with the public sector, not working with cities, it's actually working with private sector developers. So in some ways as well, in the UK particularly, the burden has been passed on to the private sector to run these processes. Burden's not the right word, it's the opportunity, but they are actually responsible for running the processes. And again, the important thing is to get that embedded in a planning process and not sort of just drop down to the lowest common denominator. And we find sort of the tick box approach where you're just consulting a community, but there's no genuine process. That's the danger. So I think, as with everything, you have to sort of understand what the best practice is and really be quite vigilant and promote it for all you're worth.